Voting continues in Russia's presidential election. Russian President Vladimir Putin, who's seeking a fourth term, cast his ballot at a polling station in Moscow. The first poll opened on Saturday in the country's far east. The polls will close at 8 p.m. in local time zones on Sunday. One recent poll says about 65% of respondents would vote for Putin. And around 110 million Russians are eligible to vote in this election. 1,500 international observers from 109 countries are monitoring the votes. 8 candidates are in the running for the country's top position. And we can now cross over to Moscow and get more for you there. I'm joined live by our correspondent, Alhosa Milesovic. Alhosa, what's the latest on the election, though? Can you update us on that? Apologies for that lack of audio. We can now return to Moscow and to Alhosa Milosevic there. He's bringing us an update on Russia's elections, which are currently ongoing. Alhosa, what's the latest on the election in Russia? Can you update us on that?
Of course, Beatrice, I hope that you can hear me now. The situation is that until 11 o'clock local time here, according to the data from the Central Election Commission here in Moscow and in Russia, around 8%, so a little bit more than 8% of Muscovites have casted their ballots here. And it is almost the same as it was back in year 2012, when the elections were held for the president of Russia, when Vladimir Putin won. So it is roughly the same figures, the same numbers as back then in 2012. There is some other interesting things to hear. For instance, first village that started voting this morning, which was 9 hours before Moscow started, they had a turnout of 100% within a couple of hours. But that's most likely because it is only 40 people living there in that village. The interesting thing is that in Crimea, more than 13% of people voted until 10 o'clock in the morning. That's being the first elections for the president of Russia, which being held in Crimea. For them, it is most likely very important and significant, historically significant event, and that's why the turnout in Crimea is so high. And as you mentioned earlier, yes, at the 8 o'clock in the evening, local time, all the voting stations will be closed in Russia, and we are expecting first results by around 3 o'clock after midnight here in Moscow and in Russia. Most likely by then, all the official results will be known for over 90% of the casted ballots, and we will know who will be the next president. And most likely, as you said, it will be Vladimir Putin again.
Right. Well, there's been trouble with the United States, though, Europe, and lately with Britain. Has that made any difference at all when it comes to the voting?
That's a very interesting question, because a number of people I've spoken with here about that situation have said that actually this what is happening currently with the UK and with the poisoning of the former Russian military intelligence colonel Sergei Skripal, his poisoning in London, that everything what is happening around that and the attacks coming from the UK and London about that is actually just helping Vladimir Putin. And they're just helping people rally around their president and supporting him even more. And that's maybe, it is the question whether the West actually expected that kind of reaction or aimed at that kind of reaction. But actually that is most likely going to happen. And very interesting, speaking of that, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, Nikolai Patrushev, who is the head of National Security Council of Russia, stated that it is expected that the Russian election system could face some kind of cyber attacks during the elections and maybe before the elections. And earlier this morning, the Central Election Commission of Russia has stated that during this night, a major cyber attack happened. They are calling it DDoS attack, happened on the electronic infrastructure of the Central Election Commission of Russia, and that cyber attack came from 15 countries. Right. So speaking about that, it is apparently the continuously rising tensions between the East and the West.
Well, President Putin, as you mentioned there earlier, though, that he does remain popular in Russia and quite likely to win that election. Is there a sense that people are happy with his leadership?
Well, according to opinion polls, according to pollsters, he has approval rate of almost 70%, and I think that speaks volumes about his work. Don't forget, Vladimir Putin became a president of Russia back in year 2000, and he inherited a country which was in state of chaos or state of disarray from his predecessor Boris Yeltsin, and the GDP was almost zero, and the country was literally starving. So he inherited a country which was in chaos. Today you are seeing that per capita GDP of this country is over $23,000, that the poverty has dropped for 50% during his reign here, and during the last 18 years he was either president or prime minister. So actually people are saying that they are living better than they are living before, and way much better. So that's maybe behind this huge support to Vladimir Putin. And don't forget, Crimea is very important for Russians as well. A number of people I spoke here, they're saying because of Crimea we are supporting Vladimir Putin. Yes, they have problems with corruption here. They're saying the corruption is a problem with Russia, but they hope that this can be dealt with. Well, Vladimir Putin said that as well, that he hoped that he will deal with that in the next 6 years of his presidential term.
All right. Alhosa Milosevic joining us there from Moscow. Thank you for that update.